Welcome to the X's and Argos Scouting Report, brought to you by Funny Bone Broth, and also this week brought to you by my mustache, which I am attempting to grow to raise money for Men's Health. If you'd like to contribute, you can find my page at movember.com/m/Ben Grant. And I know you probably need a big screen TV to see it right now, but it's early. It's very early in the process. So my name, of course, is Ben Grant. I am joined again this week because we're playing Ottawa. I've got to be joined by the Red Blacks play-by-play voice, TSN 1200's AJ Jakubec. AJ, thanks so much for joining me again on the Scouting Report.
Yeah, my pleasure, Ben.
So I guess what I want to know for this week's game is what the Ottawa Red Blacks have to play for, because I think from an Argos fan's perspective, Argos fans quickly forget the rough times of 2019 and late in the season. You know, I think maybe Argos fans are looking at this as, oh yeah, it's an easy win versus the Red Blacks. And I'm going to say that that's not necessarily the case. So what are the Red Blacks playing for this week?
Yeah, that's a great question. I kind of asking myself that as well. I think when you talk to players, though, I mean, they have pride. I think that the ones that, you know, are probably on the bubble would be playing for, you know, film and contracts and all that. And I think the best players, the ones that you would think would have teams interested in them, whether it's the Red Blacks or elsewhere, would, you know, they're players that are there for a reason because they take pride in what they do. I think all these guys take pride in what they do, and they're professionals. So yeah, it's the last home game of the year as well. I think, you know, given the fact this has been a team that hasn't been very good at home the last couple of seasons, they've lost 13 of their last 14 games at TD Place. I think they'd like to send the fans off into the off season with a win. But yeah, there's a lot of different things. It's I'm sure you'd love to say, well, they'd love to play spoiler and ruin the Argos first place hopes or something along those lines. But I think it's just about going out, winning a football game and you know, just playing the way that they're capable of playing in all three phases.
I think the fans would really like to ruin the Argos playoff hopes and take them out of first place. I think that's probably more a fan thing than a player thing. I think you're right on that.
I think Red Blacks fans probably dislike the Ticats more than the Alouettes or the Argos. So if you're ruining one team's hopes, it's at the expense of one of the others. And I honestly think that, to a man, I mean, everyone's going to be different. Some might dislike Montreal because it's closest. Some might dislike Toronto just because it's Toronto. But I think because of the short history of the Red Blacks, probably Hamilton would be the most disliked of the division rivals. So I think that I don't really know how much weight that would carry anyways.
I love that you don't have to expand on just simply saying some might hate Toronto just because it's Toronto. That and everyone understands what that means, even people in Toronto. I think that's pretty telling of sometimes how the rest of the country views the city of Toronto. But no, you're probably right on that. But at the same time, it feels nice. They've been such a good fan base. I love the Red Blacks fan base, and that's something that I've been worried about watching the 2019 Ottawa Red Blacks, watching the 2021 Ottawa Red Blacks. I'm worried that the fans are going to go away. And it's a really nice, passionate group. They're drawing very well considering how rough it's been this season, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think they've got it's first and foremost, and this is professional sports everywhere, but I think let's just look at Ontario and what we've been through over the last couple of years with some of the restrictions, that it doesn't really seem like the comfort level is there with everyone like it was pre-pandemic, even with games where, you know, it's basically you have to be fully vaccinated to go to a game now. And that's indoors, outdoors, whatever. It doesn't matter if you're talking Leafs games, if you're talking Sens games, if you're talking CFL or MLS or whatever you might be talking about. I think there's a ways to go just in terms of where we're at and drawing capacity crowds of any sort in any city right now. So you're seeing it. I was reading today, as a guy that used to work at StubHub and now has his own company that's, something similar. And they're talking about actual ticket sales maybe across the board aren't down, but scanned in sales are way down off the cliff. So that's another topic for another day on another program, I think. But I think I know what you're saying. And certainly, for example, I think the Red Blacks have 12,000 season ticket holders and 2,500 deferred. So that's down to 9,500 this year. Now, what are they going to get next year? Are they going to get 12,000? I don't know. I mean, I'd like to think that this is a loyal group and a passionate group, and I think it is. But there's a lot of factors at play here for everyone in terms of trying to draw fans in the future, and whether it's spending habits, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's wins and losses, whatever it might be. And I think everyone's in that boat trying to ensure that they can get to where they were before. And I think there's probably some sports franchises all across North America and maybe around the world wondering if it's ever going to get to those pre-pandemic type levels.
Yeah, that's a pretty scary thing to think about. I almost rather bury my head in the sand on that question, because it's noticeable. You see it. And like you're talking about, like the Argos game last week, I'm led to believe that the paid attendance was much greater than the number of heads that actually ended up being in the seats. So you have people that still may buy tickets, but when it comes time to actually going, are maybe hesitating for whatever reason. I like to think that will go away at some point, that we will have more of a return to normal. But yeah, it's a scary thing to think about. All right, let's get to this week's game. So we saw the Ottawa REDBLACKS a few weeks ago. What big changes have there been since then in terms of personnel? Do we have guys in different places, different players we should look out for?
Yeah, it's a great question. The O-line is changing week to week, unfortunately, just because of healthy bodies. It just doesn't seem like whenever Ottawa gets somebody back, like a Mark Cordy, they tend to lose a couple of guys. So they just haven't been able to put together the same group of five in back-to-back weeks all season. We'll see if they'll be able to do that. Beyond that, injuries have depleted this team in a lot of different spots where they had to get a look at different players because they injuries to Donya Namba at Sam. So it was Frankie Griffin, who started last week. Sherrod Baltimore was injured at corner. So Anthony Texada had his first CFL start last week, just like it was the first CFL start for Frankie Griffin. It was the first CFL start for Trey Hornbuckle, a defensive end. And Justin Howell, he'll start at safety once again because Antoine Pruneau looks like he's out for the season with an injury as well. So a lot of different injuries on defense. I think they were able to kind of hold up their end of the bargain on that side of the football. And, special teams has been outstanding across the board this year, although first play was Brendan Galander's ex-Argo, 100th CFL game. First play of the game, he gets injured. So that's kind of the story of the season. They haven't been good enough, and they've got a lot of different issues that they need to fix, especially in the offensive side of the ball. But 20 guys hurt going into last week, and that number would have gone up, right on the first play with that injury to Galander. So when it rains, it seems to pour, and we'll see if maybe a little more continuity week to week can help here against Toronto.
When these two teams last played, Caleb Evans was sort of the talk of the town. He'd had that great game the week before, Ottawa pulling out a win. They came into Toronto. He didn't quite look the same in that game. Is it fair to say he hasn't quite looked the same since, or have you seen glimmers of hope there from the young quarterback?
I've seen glimmers of hope. There have been some struggles. I thought he played reasonably well last week also, but there were some mistakes. For example, you get down 16-10 late third quarter against Calgary, you're driving, you're into the red zone, and he basically got under center and snapped the ball, took the ball before everyone was set. It was penalty for no end on the play, and all of a sudden 3rd and 1 became 3rd and 6. They kick a field goal. Calgary goes down and scores. It's 23-13. Just learning experiences like that you have to kind of go through at times if you're a young rookie quarterback. I heard somebody talk, I can't even remember who it was, just within the last couple of weeks, that, who's the last quarterback other than Ricky Ray that just came in and was lights out pretty much with no learning curve in his first go around as a professional quarterback. And I can't think of anybody in that time as well. So I think he's done some things well. There's some things that he needs to learn, and there are areas where he needs to be surrounded by better personnel. Also, it starts on the offensive line. And I think there's some bright spots in terms of some of the skill position players here. I think Ryan Davis has had a real good rookie season, a player to watch, Auburn's all-time leading receiver. And a guy like Nate Behar, who was a first-round draft pick in this league in Edmonton, had a really good collegiate career at Carleton, never really found his way until this year. And now he looks like a legitimate starting Canadian receiver as well. So you've got some bright spots there. RJ Harris is a solid CFL receiver, but I think they could use, and Kenny Stafford's been an upgrade too. I think he's been a guy that has come in and helped, but I think you can use a couple of receivers and maybe a running back going into next season, and also a couple of offensive linemen, especially if they're Canadian. I would think it's a no doubter that, Ottawa's going to pick first or second in the draft, depending on, it's going to be them or Edmonton. And I would think that they're going to go offensive line early in that draft to try and bolster their Canadian content there. So there's anyways, back to your question about Evans. I think there's a lot of positives here for sure. Is there enough to hand him the keys next year and say, you're the starting quarterback? Is a new general manager going to go down that road? I don't know. I think they're probably going to look and see how the free agency shakes out in the league. You would think a guy like Masoli or Evans, one of the two, is going to be a player that's going to be available, that Hamilton's going to decide on one, and the other's going to have, really, with Arbuckle going to Edmonton and the other 7 spots looking, I would think, relatively stable in terms of their quarterback situation. Now, Bethel Thompson would have to re-sign in Toronto, and Colaros would have to sign in Winnipeg, and I guess we'll see what happens in Montreal. I still think Vernon Adams is the guy there, but maybe Trevor Harris leads them to the promised land, and all of a sudden that makes them rethink things. But for the most part, Ottawa seems like the best bet if you're a veteran quarterback looking for a spot where you could be a starter. And I think if you're a new general manager of this young Red Blacks team, do you really want to go into next season with, say, Caleb Evans and Duck Hodges as your number 1 and your number 2? I think you want those guys to be brought in here next year, but I'm not sure you want to go with those guys as 1 and 2 without a more experienced option at least available to you in camp.
Is there concern in terms of the coaching staff? Like I know there's so much up in the air, given the changes that have already been made, and who knows what's going to happen in the offseason. But is there any sense that these games matter in terms of decisions that are made with regards to the coaching staff, or is that not really about the results over these last few games?
I'd be surprised. I know, and I guess, look, if you're Mark Gowdy and you're coming out and you're not going to say that the coaching staff's under the gun here as well. I mean, they said they want to bring in a general manager that's going to work with his coaching staff. They believe in the coaching staff. Paul LaPolice, along with the other coordinators as well, in Bob Dice and Mike Benavides, all have time left on their contracts, so they're not upcoming free agents. So I would think, just given how the defense and special teams have performed, and the vote of confidence to a coach that has only been here 1 year, I think that's part of the drill for the new general manager. Is this is the coaching staff that you've got in place in 2022, so this is what you're going to be working with. So if somehow the Ottawa REDBLACKS pull it together, beat the Toronto Argonauts, AJ, how will this have happened? What will have gone on in this game for the Ottawa REDBLACKS to come out on top and send the Argos home with the tails between their legs? Probably something similar that we saw the last game in Toronto, but instead of for 30 minutes, for 60 minutes. I think when you look back at that football game, they should have had more than a 9-8 lead at halftime, because 6 of the points were scored, or I guess 7 of the points were scored, but a touchdown was scored on a block kick. And they didn't take advantage of the opportunities they had. So you're going to have to convert whatever opportunities you might get in the red zone. And no major mistakes like that. No pick sixes like we saw in that game. No block punts like we saw in that game, which is, really not par for the course for what we've seen from this special teams unit that has been almost flawless all season long, with Richie Leone leading the league in net punting, with Lewis Ward, the most accurate kicker, and Devontae Dedmon leading the league in combined yards. I mean, it's plausible, for example, that this is an Ottawa team that might sweep all the special teams awards in the All-Stars in the league. I think they should. I'm not really sure there's anybody else that you would vote for maybe in terms of East All-Stars, but in terms of league All-Stars, I almost feel like some people will vote elsewhere because it's Ottawa and they're 2-10, and you can't have that many Ottawa guys on the All-Star team. But that's how good their special teams has been. So by dominating the special teams, by having a strong performance on defense and pressuring McLeod Bethel Thompson, getting him out of his comfort zone, and just by not turning the ball over on the offensive side. I don't want to say they have to play a perfect game to win, but they have to avoid all the big mistakes, the big play mistakes that have killed them. And again, it's going to be special teams and defense. And if the offense can contribute a little bit and avoid some of those big mistakes, then we'll see if they can keep it pretty close.
AJ, it has been great having you on both times this year. Hopefully we can do this again next year, and we'll have a more competitive Red Blacks team and some real rivalry building games between Toronto and Ottawa. So thank you so much for spending time with us again today.
Yeah, my pleasure, Ben.
For AJ Jakubec, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.